Yeah, so because there was a wisdom, and there has always been a wisdom among the African people, among indigenous communities across the world, really. They understand the value and the power of seed. Obviously, to grow crops and to sustain generations of people in health, because food and health are so intimately connected. And so what they did over the years and over eons of time is identify the plants which were strongest. From those plants, you don't eat everything, which
Yes.
apparently, commercialization tends to do. You keep some for another season, and not necessarily the very next season, because they understand that something in that environment has identified that plant and might be waiting for it for the next season. So they wait a little bit, keep it in store. And then when it is time to bring it forth again, bring it forth again. Or go and exchange with their neighbors, not necessarily right next door, but even in far-flung areas. And so that way, you end up always nurturing your crops, just the same way that you would do with animal husbandry. So this goat and this goat are better. So you work with the seed and then eliminate one male from the pool, and bring in another one, and then you continue to grow the strength of your herd.
Yeah.
And so indigenous seeds are the ones that carry with them the history and the wisdom of the people, but also bring forth the strongest plants, the healthiest plants, and also result in healthier outcomes. And well, as long as the soil and the water are also in tandem, because it's all a balance.
You're taking me back, as you explain, you're taking me back to my grandma and how they did it back then. This is what you're talking about, how they grew. They didn't need to keep going back every year to the store to buy new seeds, because their harvest had seed and they could just keep replanting that. And you're right, it was a community thing. If my grandma had excess, she would give it to the neighbors. But I'm glad you mentioned that exchange where we can, because our topic today is going to touch on that and how that has been, what's the word? It's being hindered in currently. So I'll hand it over to Brother Adesoji to get to the next question.
Oh, yes. Again, welcome, Sister Chioma. So my question would be, to put a flippant twist to it, is there like a body of people on a secret island somewhere, screaming like every time you want to plant a seed, it's like 1 billion Kenyan shillings or 10 billion naira before you plant? Could you enlighten as to if there's such a body exists, or is just a figment of our imagination?
No, it's not a figment of your imagination. You see, as any wise African knows, if you go to the shop and you buy a fruit, within it there is a seed. And that seed, if you take it to your land, which is healthy and fertile, if you plant it there, it will grow and give you ample replicas of whatever it was that you bought, along with more seed. And so really, it removes the power from anyone with a commercial interest to make profit off if they give you powerful seed to continue, generating life from, which is why now you see the increase in seedless produce out there, which is an abomination in itself. Let's just leave that for now, because you're eating something without life in it, but we shall suspend that conversation for another day. Now, what has happened? As you're gradually seeing, there's a group of people or groups of people who have decided that whatever occurs in nature should not be communally owned. There must be a way to capitalize on it. So they're going so far as even to dare to say that water should not be something that people can freely gain access to, simply because they want to find a way to commercialize it.
I think Coke is doing some stuff with that, yeah.
And I think Nestle, I'm not sure. Let me speak with caution in case they decide to come and knock on my door.
Listen, allegedly, right? We are alleging.
Yeah, let's use allegedly. That's convenient term, allegedly. So when it comes to feed, as you have seen, there's been an increase in GMOs and commercialization of seeds and hybridization, because hybrids also remove the power of the seed to really reproduce with strength. Yeah. So there are people who have decided there must be a way to make as much money as possible, as much profit as possible off plants, off food. So beyond just what would be manufacturing food products, which are byproducts of naturally occurring food. Now the food itself, maize or beans or whatever, how can you make much more money off it? And so they've found a way to insert into the law in different countries around the world a way in which people cannot now save seed or exchange seed or replant seed that they bought. So it becomes now a crime for an individual such as myself to be saving seed or exchanging with neighbors or fellow farmers wherever they may be, or to replant seed that I may have purchased somewhere, or seed that has grown off my crops that now replanting that now is illegal because it is somebody else's intellectual property. So now whatever occurred in nature, they took to a laboratory, messed around with it, and then decided that it is their intellectual property, and therefore thou shalt not use my stuff without giving me my dues, which is money. But over and above all that is just an attempt to control everything that is going on with the human body.
Yes.
So whatever is going to go into you in the form of a GMO crop, you do not know what it is. But because they're all interlinked, GMOs are interlinked with agrochemicals, are interlinked with pharmaceuticals. So there's this whole value chain, if you would, that they have created that ensures a certain series of success for them in terms of monetizing the human body via controlling nutrients and then non-nutrients really, and then everything else that can happen subsequently as they continue to observe what happens with populations as they ingest those products. So there's active efforts to encourage.
So is there like a international body that does this as their remit, like like a
There is
private
a
organization?
convention. There's an
Okay.
international convention that was introduced called UPOV. It's
Okay.
called something about the protection of plant varieties. And it started in Europe and in the US, and then they found a way to introduce it into what they call developing nations.
It's
whatever.
the International Union for the Protection of New Varieties of Plants, UPOV.
Yes.
Yes. I'll
So
put it in the chat.
using the World Trade Organization, they managed to leverage every time they negotiate with less developed countries, so that those governments would put into law that it is illegal to save or exchange or replant seed, so that you can actually be arrested. Even in some countries, and I saw Greenpeace running a campaign about this concerning Kenya, you can be arrested for actually reusing your own seed. And so people, it's a mess. So
Yeah.
UPOV, of course, will protect companies like Syngenta and all those who are creating seed in their labs.
Okay.
So you can't just go and use their stuff, which is fine. I don't even want their stuff. Their stuff is weird.
Exactly.
It's tainted, as far as I'm concerned. But where I draw the line is now you're coming to my home, my village, and you're saying to me, that seed, which actually, like the other day, they found some millet which had been stored underground for I don't know how many 100 years in some part of Kenya. You're saying I can't use that seed that
Yep.
my great somebody
Please save
had
some of that
preserved.
for me.
I can't use it to feed my family. I can't use it to just take care of our basic needs. That if I do so, I am breaking some kind of strange law. It's really, really perverse what is going on. And so using UPOV, which is not even like, it's not part of what would be, and I hate these organizations, but part
Yeah.
of,
We all should.
globally endorsed organization that you can legally say, hey,
United
it's
Nations.
the UN,
Yeah.
or it was the WHO, or what are the agricultural people called, whatever they're called. It's not
Food
one of
Agricultural
them
Organization.
who people seem to like for whatever reason. It's just some guys with influence and clout sat down and decided that this would be a good idea, and then got some way to leverage the World Trade Organization and nations to agree to these terms. So if they have leverage over your country, they can convince you to insert into your laws the illegality of the saving or reuse of seed, so that because you're a signatory of UPOV, or so that you can become a signatory of UPOV. And there is no real benefit as far as I can tell, except maybe there was some other kind of trade deal that was going on behind the scenes that people thought, oh, this is great. And in signing that one, they sold off the legacy and the inheritance of people for generations to come. It's a mess.
I mean, you mentioned the idea of the use of indigenous seeds now being criminalized, or i.e., the seed I bought this season, I can't use it next season. So, what they're invariably saying is to the local farmer in the countryside, in Kenya, or whatever part of Africa, before you put that seed in the land, you have to go to your government to go and say, "Oh, I have a set of seeds. Can I still use them,
From what Chioma is saying, it
or
appears
am
you can't
I
even do that.
or am I infracting on some protocol you guys have signed 10 years ago?" You
I
know,
think it's worse than that, brother. I think
Yeah,
the
you can't
government
even
comes
do
to
that.
you.
oh, so the government is actually policing their own population
Exactly.
on behalf of commercial interest in
There
the
you
other
go.
part of the world.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
which brings me to the question: usually, when farmers are aging and passing on, part of what they pass on are the seeds, the techniques that goes into tilling the land. So you're now saying I mean, following on from our conversation last week, one, they don't have the land. Now they can't even pass on seeds.
Yeah. Yes. And
Please
this is the
make that make
madness.
sense.
It does not make sense. It's an insanity. Mankind has embraced an insanity, and they've added it to the list of insanities that they've embraced.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. But you see what they did, which is very clever, and it's evil. I'm not approving of it, but it's very smart. Is they just gradually made their way into these farmers' lives, using these agricultural extension officers, to give advice. We've come to counsel you on how to get the most out of your land because you want to make more money, don't you? And so we're going to teach you how to do it. And then these are the better seeds that you can use. And so they started to introduce these hybrids that government organizations have been, culturing and growing in consultation with who knows which international body. And so now every season, farmers are finding that they actually do have to go and buy seed. So they've started getting used to it. 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So they're kind of desensitized to the idea of having to purchase seed. The memory, the social and cultural memory of being independent from seed purchase is fading or has faded in certain areas of Africa. It just, it's become kind of the norm. Oh yeah, oh no, I'm so broke. What am I going to do? I have to
It's
take
a
a loan so I can
continuation
buy
of the
seed.
colonization of the mind.
Exactly.
Right.
So farmers are taking loans to buy seed for this season's, planting. And so they're already now in shackles. So, if God favors them and the weather is good, they'll end up with a harvest, and then they'll be able to pay, certain loans off and whatever. After buying other inputs and begging the government to reduce the cost of, fertilizer, which is ruining their land in the first place. But, they'll beg, please reduce the cost of fertilizer instead of just using mulch or using manure to restore the health and the life of the soil. But they're buying these other things which are killing the soil, and then so their crops maybe make it, so now they can sell, and then they're conned by the middlemen, and so they end up barely breaking even, paying off their debts, and then the next season's planting comes, and they have to take another loan. So you don't even have farmers who are necessarily free. And some of them also give into this game that's being played with the government in pricing, and so they hoard their harvest, and they say to the government, we're not giving you until you improve the price.
Yeah.
And so it's not, food has become not a conversation of health or community welfare or benefit. It's become another tool in capitalism's arsenal of weapons,
Exploitation of people.
Yeah.
right, and to dehumanize people to the point where they're forgetting that food is actually a necessity. So perhaps the conversation about food should be held at a different level than that of money, kind of like healthcare. Money should not be that conversation that you're having. Education, if you're developing your nation, money, all these basic things But then there we are. Insanity.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
it's
what
as
we're
you said.
talking about is food imperialism. That's what it is. It's
Exactly.
closing the loop.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
the loop has been closed because once you have people locked in and depending on food as well, then that's 100% imperialism, as Thomas Sankara said. Thomas Sankara, if nobody has ever seen that documentary, Thomas Sankara, the upright man, in the very beginning, he says, if you want evidence of imperialism, look at your plate.
Just
If
look at your plate.
you import your food, I don't need to explain to you what imperialism is all about. So, sister, and we welcome you. We love you for the work you do. And I have to apologize for listeners who are listening to you and getting depressed by but it's good to know. No, listeners, it's good to know these things, that these are the challenges we need to fight. If you look at Nkrumah's book, Neocolonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism, he's warning about that. He's saying, let's not surrender our food independence. And he wrote this book in 1965. So now, you know why the US sent an official letter of protest to Nkrumah, to Ghana's government when that book was published. Not only sent an official protest, they cut off aid to Ghana because of that book. Aid was $25 million, which today is worth more than $400 million.
Yes.
That's what they cut off when Nkrumah wrote that book. Okay, so that's 65. In the 80s, Sankara has complained about the same thing. How can we import our food and be that dependent? To his credit, and may he rest in peace, within 3 months, his country was food self-sufficient, independent. Fast forward today, African countries, many countries are going through hunger, starvation now. Why? Because we import $35 billion every year, $35 billion from food from the outside world. Think about that. This is money that should be going into our economies. Sister, you mentioned the issue of water as well. Remember, in Peru, water was privatized by a US company. The government allowed a US company to take control. You know,
That doesn't even make sense when you say that.
Rainwater. Think about that. Even rainwater.
It doesn't even make sense.
It did not make sense. And then the people of Peru said, "This is the limit."
Yeah.
They came out to the streets, and people who haven't seen this documentary that details that, and it also covers Kenya, by the way, how this U.S. company came and took over production of corn in a part of Kenya. And then everybody could not use their seeds as well because the concession was given to the U.S. company. The documentary is called "The End of Poverty" with a question mark at the end by Philip Diaz. So he explains that. So what I'm saying is that what we're discussing here, you explained the World Trade Organization, the WTO, which enforces global trade, right? Is like a mafia organization, like the mafia getting together, creating an organization saying, okay, members, if in the past you engaged in bank robbery, going forward, bank robbery is now illegal. But for you who stole in the past, you can keep that money. And what do I mean by this? They have a rule that you are not allowed to subsidize your farmers. Think about that. Even though the United States spends $20
Brother
billion.
Alimadi, if you can please explain to our audience, if my grandpa is sitting in Kikoko or wherever it is, what is subsidize?
Subsidize is, they say the free market, right? In this capitalist country, they say everything works out by itself, demand and supply. They find they coincide, so there's no need for government intervention. That's what they say. That's the basis of capitalism, right? That's on paper. It's all nonsense. If they believed in that, there should be no farmers in the United States because farming is not cost effective in the United States, right?
True.
So, but they will not yield that because they understand food sovereignty. It's like, think about that. Depending on another country to feed your people, right? So they won't yield that, even though they say officially, yes, capitalism, let the market work itself. They will not allow their farmers to become extinct. So they subsidize them. They give them money to beat the difference. So in Kenya, farmers are making a loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it's in the United States, that loss, the difference, the government would make up for it. Say, okay, so you're going to lose what, 10,000 shillings this year? No, you won't. We will cut a check to you to cover that loss, 10,000. You're going to lose 20,000 shillings? No, we'll cut you a check for 20,000 to keep them in business, existing, and to keep them prospering.
So
but
to
the World Bank comes to Kenya and says, no, you cannot subsidize your farmers. If you do, we won't give you a World Bank loan. And let me make one final point, and then I would want some reaction from the sister. There's an economist, and now I forget his name, Nicholas Howard, a professor. People should Google him and look for African poverty on YouTube, and you'll see this lecture. And he's given an example where he said, finally, a brave African revealed the secret. He said, Malawi's Minister of Finance spilled the beans when he was forced to explain why there was famine one particular year in Malawi. He said, because the World Bank told us to burn the food stocks that we had in storage as a condition to get loan from the World Bank.
Loans, yeah.
I rest my case. Sister, the floor is yours.
Hey, it's hard to be quiet and let you all talk while you say these things, and I'm like, but that doesn't make sense. But that doesn't make sense. But why? But so this is what's going on in my head. So mwananchi, right? And I want to talk to that farmer. Kama wewe ni mkulima Kenya, halafu hujapata faida kutokana na mavuno yako. Nchi yako inaweza kukulipa, sivyo? Chioma, inaweza kukulipa ndio usiwe na hasara. Lakini World Bank wanasema la, nchi usiwalipe wakulima. Don't pay them. No, we're not going to give you a loan. Hatutawapatia loan. Mkilipa wakulima, you're not getting a loan, Kenya. So your leaders are being put in this awful situation where if there's staff in the government that needs to be supported by finance and they need that loan from the World Bank, but they cannot get that loan unless they accept that they will not pay you farmers. So they cannot take care of you. Because that's the condition this is the thing that I want the regular Kenyan, the regular African to get. These organizations that come appearing like they're helping you, they're really not helping you. Because if they were, they would not put conditions on these terms of aiding you. There would be no
friendly
conditions.
Right. Yeah. And for our listeners who don't follow Kiswahili, the sister was simply explaining what I had just said in English. Okay.
Listen, I speak English all the time. For the listeners who don't speak Kiswahili, you'll be fine if I spoke for 1 minute to my Kenyan Swahili speakers, and Tanzanian, and Congo, and East Africa in general.
Right.
Yes.
The floor is yours, Sister Chioma.
Yeah. So yes, to the point that Milton was making,
I know.
It's so bad you have to laugh, right?
I know.
It's really bad. And
they have us in a bind.
Let me tell you what is the worst part of all of this. It's not that African leaders are unaware of the machinations and the manipulations of the global system. They are fully aware. They know what's going on. They know that they're being played, if you will. They know that they're being given the short end of the stick. They know that there is a game afoot. But because, and I'm going to use this word, because they have chosen to go the path of debt and to play into the hands of the people who are lending them money, supposedly lending them money, then they have to bend over and take it. Sorry for the graphic. Yeah. So what has happened is that they keep giving themselves over to this thing because they don't want to end up like many African leaders who are just suddenly
Disappeared.
made dead.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
very
not funny.
sad.
Actually, I
With
should
the
not laugh,
fishes.
but again, it's so
Also
bad
with-
you laugh.
It's really tragic. But what's happening is that they're missing the point. Yes, we do have traitors in countries who are very willing to betray their nations to globalist agendas for some piece of land or some money or something or the other. But all in all, the citizens of countries in Africa are quite willing to fight for their own true independence if they are given the tools to do so. And they would gladly stand by any leader who genuinely sits down and tells them, listen, these people, they want to take our rights. They want to take our freedom by making us use, their money. And if we do that, that means we have to fire 5,000 people. If we do that, that means we're going to have to increase the price of fuel. If we do that, that means there isn't going to be any free primary school education. If we do that, this and this and this and this and this. And so what we are proposing is that forget building roads this year. What we would like us to do this year is work together to build our food reserves. But keep in mind, they might come to kill me and my family. So if they do that, please continue. Do you see what I'm saying?
Of course.
The liberation struggle is, it needs to actually start.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So, some people
And it
might
means
say,
sacrifice.
but it's
That's what you're
already-
saying. It means
Yes.
sacrifice, yeah.
It does. It means actual, genuine sacrifice and for real courage.
Right.
So whatever happened, like with the Kenya Land and Freedom Army in the forests and any other people, people
I
who
am
were just
so
willing
glad
to
you brought them up.
die so that they could be set free. Unfortunately, they got played by the government that stepped into power
Right.
because, it became a puppet government. But like what the heart and the spirit, of the Kenya Land and Freedom Army, for those who don't know what I'm referring to, they're being called the Mau Mau, but it's the Kenya Land and Freedom Army.
Right.
So for what they did, or for what people like Lumumba did, or Sankara, or whoever else had the genuine will to liberate their people and
Right.
set them free from neo-colonialism, neo-imperialism, that heart is what has to be restored to the people.
Absolutely.
Because what's happening is we're just gradually, tightening the shackles on our necks, on our arms, on our feet, ourselves.
Our stomachs too, now that they're going for food.
Right.
Step by step. And the middle class is there saying, yes, but this makes sense. Why? Because they read it in a textbook, not because they've stopped to look around the environment and ask themselves, hang on a second, where is all the food that we used to have when we were children?
Are you coming for the intellectuals, Chioma?
We have to start. So
No, really.
rattle some cages, because these are the guys who actually have the ability to voice this issue to those who are in power. They call it power. But those are the conversations.
Right.
But the thing is that we have to start somewhere, and they have to start by acknowledging to themselves that there is no real liberty that they're enjoying in their lives. What they're actually experiencing and encountering is increasing amounts of constraints, and that's what's happening. So whereas before, there was a wide variety of starches that you could consume in the market, now you're kind of just consuming maize or a derivative of maize, wheat or a derivative of wheat,
That's
something
just the
like that.
thought of it
Rice,
is giving me a stomach upset.
so rice,
And more than that, actually. The
white
diseases.
potato, Irish potato, or if you didn't notice, that the sweet potatoes changed color suddenly, then now you go online and find out why are they yellow now and they used to be white before.
Are you telling me my grandma's white sweet potato that you'd open and it has a nice white middle is gone?
There's still
No, it used
some
to be
around,
it used to
there's
be
some yellow
red.
ones.
It used to be red on the outside.
Yes,
to be
but
red on
white
the outside.
inside.
Now
It's changed. Now they're yellow.
Now it's
So they
yellow.
flipped the.
Yes, because they want to give you vitamin A. I mean, you ignorant people don't know how to take care of yourselves and eat vitamin A. I mean, come
I
on.
forgot that bit.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean,
Thank you for
right?
reminding me.
You're not ignorant. You know what I mean? It's
I
just
get
a
it,
mess,
yeah.
and they're doing it with matoke. They're coming after matoke. They want to introduce, vitamin A infused matoke, and they're going after cassava. I believe somewhere I think in Nigeria they're working on some kind of project. It's not. It's not funny at all.
I
But,
know, I disagree.
because for these guys, it makes sense for you to be able to commercialize a small, controllable amount of food groups. So that's what they're trying to do, is just show you how versatile wheat is. I mean, you can have pasta, you can make it into chapatis, you can do mandazi, you can make chin chin, you can do, but that's just wheat. It's amazing, and it'll just take care of you and your whole family. The whole week you can have a wheat product, bread, all that cake and everything. It's so great and glamorous. Meanwhile, the wheat that they're giving you is bleached, has had everything good stripped off it, has been sprayed to death with glyphosate. And then they have decided that because it's low in nutrients, which they stripped out of it in the first place, now they are fortifying your wheat flour. And you don't know what they're saying this is vitamin A. From where?
Yeah.
If the seed already had the vitamin A and then you took it out, what have you now put in to call vitamin A? And guys are just going to saying it's fortified. The other day I went to the supermarket and I saw the cooking oil fortified. I'm like,
how can you fortify?
What does it even mean?
Red oil will work for me, thank you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But everybody is lauding these as advancements and developments. If we're going to catch up with the West, these are the things that we have to do. Let's industrialize, but they're not talking about the nature of the industrialization that must
And the impact.
And so they're open to anything.
The irony is that industrialization has created food deserts in the US. A bunch of cities have been named, and you can go Google it for those in Kenya wondering about this, or anywhere else in Africa. For those cities where they've built and overbuilt, they've taken away the access to cheap food, affordable, not cheap necessarily, affordable and fresh food. So that's what this industrialization, if that's what Africa wants to do, that's what it gets you. It creates a food desert. But Chioma, brother Adesoji was speaking to you about UPOV, or rather the organization. Yes, you did mention UPOV. Adesoji, were you done with that line of questioning?
Yes, I was also going to, yeah, I mean, it's food, as Thomas Sankara often says, you are what you eat. So if you're feeding your body toxins, guess what's going to come out on the other end? And then, which brings me to this question, actually, the health implication of all this toxins in the average African. And when I say average, I don't mean that in terms of size, in terms of means.
Yeah.
If we don't have a viable healthcare system, and we're eating things we don't understand, what do you see in terms of the long-run impact for this sort of ingestion of quote-unquote fortified foods?
Okay.
Before Sister responds to that, can I add to what you just asked? The same question. No, it's the same. It's just I meant complementing the question. Walter Rodney wrote How Europe Underdeveloped Africa in 1972. Think about that. And in that book, there's a chapter where he analyzes the impact of the elimination of different types of foods, indigenous foods that we had in African company, the physical impact. There's the book. Everybody should get that. And you'll find that he was writing about what we are discussing today in the 21st century. Because he said by eliminating the variety under colonialism, you started developing kwashiorkor, all these other diseases that we never had, because we had the richest variety of foods, which is what the sister has been emphasizing on as well. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Because you can also see what they swapped in exchange for what was nutritious and beneficial. They swapped in fast foods. And if you could get brand names into your country, then oh my goodness, you really hit it. And let me tell
You've
you,
arrived.
can I confess? I used
Please
to believe,
confess.
We are arriving. Wow.
When you saw
KFC,
McDonald's and when what are they called now in Nairobi?
KFC and Burger King and Domino's,
you were in line ordering
whatever.
your 3-piece chicken.
Look at Africa. We're being recognized. How amazing. Because that comes from the mindset of inferiority. Until they say we're good enough to eat their poison, we are not good enough. I mean, see the warped thinking that enters somebody's head at some point. It's terrible. Because with now people like KFC, they bring in their potatoes from Egypt. And as someone was proudly bragging, oh, we've already had GMOs in the country if you didn't know. because with the, they look for a certain type of potato, and the potato has to be perfect. But like someone was saying, I watched a video where he was saying what they do is they engineer out the information that the potato is giving you. Because when you're peeling a potato, you notice a black spot. The potato is telling you this particular section, we had issues when we were growing. So just remove, continue with the rest. We managed the rest. Or if it's green, it's like poison, throw it away.
Yeah.
But now these geniuses went and decided, no, we want the perfect potato. And so they silenced the information the potato is giving. So people are just ingesting. I'm eating this. Hey, look at me eating. I mean, I had fast food. Wow, great. And, as if we needed to go back to look at America. I mean, America had the whole